Charlie was filled with a patriotic spirit from his youth, and he was an all-American in everything he did. And one of the last things he said to me is, "Please, sir, save Chicago." We're going to do that. We're going to save Chicago from horrible crime.
5 months ago, I put the FBI there. They've done a good job. But that's limited what they can do. What you really need is our big, strong soldiers to get them into shape. We're not letting Chicago fail.
President Donald Trump, a few days ago, outside the Charlie Kirk Memorial Service and inside the service, talking about public safety in Chicago. Welcome back. Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, editor at the Center Square for Illinois. You can get the headlines in your inbox by going to thecentersquare.com. All right, we've got some comments from State Representative Shawn Ford, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and President Donald Trump about public safety and what is happening on the space of beyond, police on the streets. What about the National Guard? Shawn Ford sharing some of his thoughts on that, but also immigration enforcement, because it's not just the idea of trying to combat crime. It's also the idea of having federal agencies come into cities like Chicago and step up enforcement, be it the FBI, be it ATF, be it DEA, be it in Immigration Customs Enforcement. But ICE is not being welcomed in Chicago. We saw a protest outside of the Broadview ICE facility last week that's brought out Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who's also a U.S. Senate candidate. You've got former state senator and Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss being among those who attended, but you also had candidates for office attending as well. One got tossed around by an ICE official or a federal official because she was blocking a vehicle on the roadway, and that video circulated. So you've got concerns about ICE being heavy-handed, and a variety of other concerns about National Guard possibly being deployed to Chicago, something the president said time and again that he's going to do, but he's going into Memphis first, and that's with the blessing of the Tennessee mayor. But at the behest of Governor J.B. Pritzker, he says there's not an emergency in Chicago or Illinois, and says that they don't want the National Guard there. But President Donald Trump, in a memorial service for Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated on September 10th, being remembered over the past weekend here, a large crowd in Arizona, and Donald Trump stood to the podium and talked about some of the final words he heard from Charlie Kirk.
Charlie was filled with a patriotic spirit from his youth, and he was an all-American in everything he did. And one of the last things he said to me is, "Please, sir, save Chicago." We're going to do that. We're going to save Chicago from horrible crime.
And you can see there the crowd, rather large. But on the way there, the president also talked about the issue of public safety in Chicago.
Last weekend, they lost 11 people were murdered and 28 people were shot. That's not shot at. That means actually hit. 100 were shot at and missed. That's what I call dangerous. And Pritzker's going out and saying, we've got crime under control. Now, it went down a little bit because for 5 months ago, I put the FBI there. They've done a good job. But that's limited what they can do. What you really need is our big, strong soldiers to get them into shape. We're not letting Chicago fail. And we're going to get started in Memphis. We'll be very successful, just like we were in D.C.
Now, we've heard Chicago residents go to the Chicago City Council time and again for the past 2 years, calling for federal agencies to come to Chicago to clean up crime, to clean up immigration, to do a whole variety of things. And even after Trump was elected, they said, Trump, come to Chicago, come to Chicago. But you've got others pushing back, like we've talked about for weeks. Governor J.B. Pritzker, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle, Democrats up and down the legislature, they've been pushing back, saying there is no emergency. But when you have that up against the president saying 11 people were killed in one weekend, or 100 were shot at in the span of a few days, how do you balance that? I talked with State Representative Shawn Ford. He's a Chicago Democrat on the west side in the Austin neighborhood, and I asked him what the perception is about public safety in his neighborhood.
Yeah, I think everyone, especially the black community and the brown community, have fear of what a nationalized police force would mean to our community. And so I hear people that are afraid that a nationalized police force is bad for our community. I hear communities, people in the community that have had people killed in their families that want to feel safer and have relief. And they are saying that they wish that the federal government and the state and the cities could work together to figure out how to best deter crime. I feel the communities are trapped in between political war when lives are at stake. And if we had someone from Washington, the president of the United States, that was willing to really have meaningful solutions and meaningful collaborative efforts, I think that we could probably come together with the federal and the state and the cities to bring in meaningful support.
So that support being more dollars, and Ford is one, along with Governor J.B. Pritzker and others, saying that they want more community violence intervention funding, and that is millions of dollars going to nonprofit groups. Some are called peacekeepers, other CRED. I think Ceasefire was one of them. You've got Violence Interrupters being another. These nonprofit groups that seek out tax dollars to pay people who may have been incarcerated in the past, but say they're reformed, and they take to the streets and try to get young people to not do violence. But you've got this story that's been elevated from the center square. You can read Illinois governor on photo with wanted suspects. No way to vet everybody. And this picture has made the rounds. It's a picture that the governor's office released last month, earlier this month on the 5th of September. And it features an individual that is a suspect in a violent, deadly burglary, where a bunch of cars smashed into a Louis Vuitton store in downtown Chicago, and on a getaway, smashed into a vehicle with a soon-to-be father who was just getting ready to be on maternity leave. So you've got this photo that surfaced, circulated, CWB Chicago reporting out that this individual was suspected to have been part of that. But when this picture was taken, that crime hadn't happened. When this picture was taken, though, the individual in the picture allegedly was wanted in 4 different states. Jim Talamonte, reporter for the Center Square, he went to Joliet yesterday to ask the governor about if there needs to be better vetting for who's getting tax dollars as part of these violence intervention groups. And here's the governor's response to Jim's pretty direct question of, what can be done about making sure that people who are wanted aren't getting tax dollars?
You're talking about community violence intervention. Yeah.
Right, that funding isn't going to people who might be...
Well, you have to understand that the way that community violence intervention works is it is often the case that people who have been in prison before but served their time and may have been in gangs before, who are growing older, are actually some of the best people to have deterring people from joining gangs and from being involved in violence in their communities. That's one of the reasons it's worked. Community violence intervention in this state has worked. You've seen crime drop precipitously, especially violent crime. And again, one of the reasons for that has been organizations like CRED and other CVI organizations that have been funded by city, county, state, and the federal government. And Donald Trump has cut those funds And that will have a deleterious effect on our ability to fight crime, in addition to the cuts that he's made to law enforcement across the United States.
Now, last week when we talked about this, I did share a couple of comments from State Representative Shawn Ford about violence intervention funding, and he said that it's important, but he also said and acknowledged that there's some things that can be shored up.
And so the answer to that is it's a good investment. Could it be improved? I think it can, but I don't think that it should be ended. And I don't think that we should be looking to spend less. We should fine tune the efforts and make sure that we spend the money in the areas where we know violence is high.
And more from Ford saying, there might be some better vetting needed for who's getting these tax dollars.
Many times you have politicians and parents that try to talk to the juveniles and those that are delinquent, but we can't connect with them the way people that are actually in that space. And so I don't shut the door on people that have had transgressions in the past, but I say that we have to be very selective.
Now, the governor yesterday asked again. He didn't necessarily directly address Jim Talamonte's question, but another reporter was there to ask the governor a follow-up to the peacekeeper photo story here, about this individual. And he was wanted in 4 different states. And how is it possible he's taking pictures with the governor?
It's awful when anybody commits a crime, and when you say that we shouldn't have somebody who was involved in crime before in their lives involved in community violence intervention, that's just not how it works. We want people who understand, who've lived in the communities, who have fallen into that lifestyle, to work now to deter people from entering a life of crime, and particularly for our young people. There's no way, by the way, when you take a picture to vet everybody. Do you know how many pictures I took out there with people who are sitting in the audience? I do it all the time. I do it when I'm walking along the street. We have terrific executive protection folks. But there's not a lot they can do. When people want to come up and take a picture with me, they can't, I'm sorry, let me see your background, let me look you up before you can take a picture. That's just not how it works.
I mean, the suspect had warrants outstanding in multiple states, though.
That isn't something that our EPU can know, and honestly, we were invited into that environment, and we know that people who are involved in community violence intervention are people who have had a previous life of crime. Certainly, nobody knew that this person had warrants in other states if they were active at the time.
So again, that's the governor reacting to questions about this individual who he was pictured with, having been wanted in 4 other states. When it comes to, vetting, he says you can't, vet everybody you take a picture with. But you can. I mean, it wasn't just that a picture was taken with this individual, right? It's not just that picture there was taken with Pritzker. It was the fact that this picture taken with Pritzker was shared by the Pritzker administration in an official press release where the governor's office had 7, 8, 9, 10 different pictures they shared from this event, and this was one of them that they shared. He says you can't vet everybody you take a picture with, but I guess you could vet what pictures you're going to post publicly. But now that picture is not part of the governor's record. They took it off of the internet, but we've got it in our emails, so that's how you can see that picture. But so that's the public safety aspect. National Guard troops, should they be on the ground? You can hear the debate back and forth, but then you get into the immigration debate. And again, over the weekend, Friday, you had that protest outside of Broadview that got some attention, and you're going to see more attention put on that today because Republican gubernatorial candidate Ted Dabrowski is holding a news conference later on this morning outside that facility as well to draw attention to the issue of victims of illegal immigration. But you had people protesting Friday, including, a mayor, a lieutenant governor, other elected officials, and you've had other elected officials across the country seeming to take part in these types of protests. Well, earlier this week, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked this question.
The admin has openly discussed taking legal action against officials in sanctuary jurisdictions. Just this last weekend, we saw Mayor of Evanston, Daniel Bliss, rioting and protesting outside the ICE facility near Chicago. Are there plans to start arresting sanctuary mayors or governors going forwards?
unless they commit a crime, I don't see them being arrested. But if they are violating federal law, if they are violating state law, then of course they should be arrested by state and local law enforcement. If they're violating federal law, then they can expect the consequences of that behavior.
So the White House saying that they don't anticipate these elected officials getting arrested, but if they break the law, they could face potential penalties there. So the issue of immigration, obviously a hot button one, and Shawn Ford says that in Chicago, he's hearing some troubling stories about people who are, not criminals being stopped and detained by ICE and so on. But I asked him, shouldn't federal immigration law be enforced in the city of Chicago?
Oh, if it's a law of the land, then it should be enforced. It should be enforced without a doubt. I think that we would be. I think in America, if we knew that we had criminals that are causing our lives to be at risk, we should want to get them out of this country. But the people that have called my office have been working men that actually have jobs, that actually have families. And I haven't really heard of any cases where they've caught major violent offenders. I see people getting pulled over for traffic stops that are being deported and not given a path to remain here with their family.
While Shawn Ford says he hasn't seen major stories of violent criminals being arrested, you can look at the Department of Homeland Security and ICE social media pages and the amount of mugshots of people they're taking off the streets across the country, including in Chicago, who are alleged of committing some pretty heinous crimes. But here we are. We're continuing on our coverage each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, the editor of The Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and get the latest headlines in your inbox by signing up for the newsletter. Make that happen today. It's Illinois in Focus Daily.